welcome everyone here and thank the Second Presbyterian Church for allowing this room for this meeting tonight. Welcome to our neighborhood, to Martinez Town, Santa Barbara neighborhood. We're very happy to see everyone here. So I just would like to let you know that our Councilor Benton is in the house here. He's over here in the back, if you could wave to everybody. And then we have some candidates that are running for mayor. And if you could just all stand up and say hello to everybody. We're going to go around and everybody's going to say their name. Because this is neighborhood time, so we're just asking for everybody at this moment to just stand up and say your name. So I'm going to start with you right here. So if you could just stand up and say it.
Hello, my name is Bernadette Hardy. I'm with the International District Healthy Communities Coalition and UNM's Department of Equity and Inclusion.
Okay, and then if we could go down.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chad Gruber. I am a lawyer with United South Broadway Corporation. I do foreclosure defense work, and I sit on the board of the Barelas Community Coalition.
Can you say your name? Stand up and say your name. Just so
Welcome.
And you stand up.
Feliz Garcia.
Louder, a little louder. Can you say your name?
Feliz Garcia.
Manuel González.
Right here. Go ahead.
Yo voy speaking.
Okay, you.
Honesty Jaramillo. Next.
Kim Calendar,
I'm Soledad.
Diana,
Rafael Martinez.
Alejandro Jara.
Jesse Lopez.
Bernadette Modis, Tiffany Broadus,
Francis Ortega Wells Park.
Dina Archuleta, candidate for mayor. Olivia Price from San Jose Neighborhood Association. Mary Lou Bacher from San Jose Association.
Michael Pride from UNM School of Architecture and Planning.
Deirdre Bird.
Kimi Alvarez.
Pam Martinez.
Gloria Serna.
Mary Lou Naranjo.
Candelaria Patterson, Laurelwood Neighborhood Association, and the APS Board.
Hi, Angela Vigil, Historic Neighborhood Alliance, Martinez Town, and Victory Hills. So.
Right here.
Oh, she already did it.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm ready.
You're ready. Oh, I'm sorry.
Gabriel Campos. Robert Lake.
Diana Dorn Jones, South Broadway neighborhood.
Susan Dixon.
Inequities.
Vicente Quevedo. Jeff Hertz.
Elizabeth Benzel.
Christina Palaca, neighborhood resident. Maria Martinez.
Hi, Pat.
This is not a poker game.
Bree Jarland, the Albuquerque Affordable Housing Coalition.
Marion Pendleton.
Fabian Lopez.
Renee Horvath from the West Side.
Shanna Schultz.
Andrew Webb.
Matt Kroskian.
Stella Crosby. Michaela Rose Whitmore. Laura Franco. Brianna Kashi.
Lucas Pedraza.
Francis Armijo, South Broadway Neighborhood Association.
Rita Sanchez, South Broadway neighborhood.
Jody Gritman.
Ivan Westergaard, St. Paul Lutheran, and Albuquerque Interfaith.
Richard Moore, Los Jardines Institute.
David Vogel.
Tim Keller, former International District Senator and candidate for mayor.
Adrian Carver, I'm the president of the Knott Hill Neighborhood Association.
Nick, I'm the president of the Santa Barbara Martinez Town Neighborhood Association. Thank you all for being here.
I'm Russell Brito. I'm the father of Rafael Colon, a proud Albuquerque High Bulldog. That's my best title, Rafael's dad. My name is Brian Colon. I'm also one of your candidates for mayor here tonight. Thank you.
Michael Jensen, Isaac Benton, and there are 2 or 3 empty seats if people come in or want to sit down.
I'm happy to stay.
And I'm Loretta Naranjo.
You okay? Are you
Sure.
let me?
Martinez Town, Albuquerque Interfaith and Historic Neighborhood.
I'm Robert Nelson. I'm a Relative Local Park resident on their board and I'm also a member of the Historic Neighborhood Alliance.
I am Bianca Encinas. I'm a member of the Historic Neighborhood Alliance, and also I live in Wells Park. And I just want to say this nerdy thing. So I grew up in the South Valley. I'm going to be 42 years old. I went to school to Mountain View Elementary School, and my first grade teacher is Miss Martinez when I was in the first grade. So I'm 21, and that was when I was 6 years old. So I have a good memory for all my teachers in elementary school. Right from full circle. So welcome. I'm going to hand it over to
Thanks, Chad. So thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. The Oscar for Best Picture goes to... No, I'm just kidding. Moonlight! All right! Tonight we're going to talk about why we're here. The big core issue of what we're trying to do tonight and have this conversation is building equity for the community on up and having these kind of discussions around this kind of safe space. So we want to create some community agreements for that. Bianca decided to write some of these down. We're going to ask the crowd for some of these examples, but first I'll start it off. We want to actually have a very safe and respectful space, number one. And some examples of that is we don't want to go around town saying things like, well, I heard that my friend Jeff Hertz over there said this over there at the bar. We don't want to do that. We want to be respectful of our opinions. They are meant to be listened to here and respected and received and inclusive. Can anyone think of another example of a good community agreement for this particular discussion tonight? Angela.
Lower or turn off your cell phones.
Thank you. Anyone else? Adrian, back there. Move up, move back. So that means if you find yourself participating a lot, move back, or if you feel like you're not participating a whole lot, try and move up so you can participate. That's good. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Community alliance and support.
Community alliance and support. Thank you. That's a very important one. I got one. We have a lot of people here tonight. Obviously, we want to be respectful of everyone's perspectives. So I ask that everyone please listen when everyone's speaking and try not to interrupt. I know it's you gotta have it sometimes, but you know we'll make sure that we call on you and try to acknowledge your perspective and get you talking in front of this crowd. Anyone else? Fabian.
List next steps.
Thank you. List next steps. That is a very good one. Don't want to walk away from a meeting going like, so what do we do now? What do we do now? I'm going to go home and have dinner. That's a Anyone else have any community agreements they'd like to add?
Do we have a scribe, somebody taking notes?
Yes, I think we'll probably all take notes and take turns. If anybody wants to help volunteer with that, that's what we'll do.
Yes, because at the end of the day, we are all volunteers, right? We do not get paid to do this work. So there's Robert and myself and Loretta who are up here tonight facilitating. But if anyone in the audience would like to take some notes, please do. And we'll also be taking notes in the flip chart papers.
Yeah, I think I will kick it over to Bianca for this brief historical review as we move into our urban area.
And it's a little intimidating to do this in a room like this because I know many of you know a whole lot more than I do, right? So I'm going to try and make this interactive. This is a little, these are not easy issues to talk about in the community, right? So what we're going to do is go do a brief historical overview of planning. We're going to do an update on the comp plan and get into some discussion. We're going to talk about some recommendations, right? Because a lot of times there's these assumptions that communities don't have solutions, when in reality we have a whole lot of solutions because at the end of the day we're experts in our communities, right? Then we'll talk about what we're asking the city council for. Then we'll talk about next steps. And then we're going to have some local poets in the house who have been inspired by some of the discussions we have. So we have one right here and another one. We're going to share some of their quick poetry, right? Because it was a way for us to try and integrate some young folk into this conversation, right? Because a lot of times when we go to some of our meetings, it's pretty much 40 and above, right? Unless they're there as a part of their schoolwork from the university. So we thought, hey, how do we bring in some other folks who don't traditionally go to these meetings? So it's going to be the folks. So this isn't, I am in no way an expert, but what we thought, that being that we have different people in the room who have different levels of experience out there, and I'm just looking for my phone because some of you do know, we are very respectful of time. We said the meeting will end at 7:30, and believe me, the meeting will end at 7:30, right? That's not saying that people can't have discussions afterwards. You can all hang out and have discussions, but we want to be respectful of the fact that I have children for myself. I've been at work all day. I came here, haven't seen my kids yet, right? So I want to be respectful of people who have different responsibilities outside of this paradigm. Okay? So the first thing is, thinking about the history of planning in the United States, right? One of the first things that we think about is manifest destiny, right? Because manifest destiny there was tools within the United States legal system to allow for this, right? It wasn't just a concept of, oh, let's go west. It was legal tools that the U.S. was able to use to displace people, to take their land, right? And it may depend whose perspective you're coming from. I come from more of a Chicana Native Indigenous perspective of it was a way of displacing and justifying legally that it was okay to take their land. So this was justified through the legal system. Okay? So this is nothing new. Planning is nothing new. And I want to remind us too, planning didn't start with the United States, right? If you look at a lot of the pueblos, if you look at some of the ancient ruins, whether it's here or Mexico City or other parts of the world, planning has been going on in communities for hundreds and hundreds of years. Even when you think about acequias, when you think about the chinampas in Mexico City, right? The way they built the pyramids, the way they built Chaco Canyon, all of these things was planning done in all communities by all people. So it wasn't just the United States. So we had manifest destiny. Then there's a whole lot of things that happened between manifest destiny, and then we had to jump us forward to the 1900s, right? Because this could take a whole, people spend their lives studying this, right? Getting PhDs in this. So what we did for the purposes, and I could have spelled redlining wrong, for the purposes of our low writing group, is we jumped to redlining, right? So redlining, who knows what redlining is? Yeah.
Well, it's where they would circle an area and folks of color could not buy in that area.
Exactly, right? So this started in the early 1900s, right? So these were actually systems and laws by the U.S. government that would do this, right? They would do this to people of color communities and Native Indigenous communities, right? So this was pre-civil rights era. But still to this day, this still occurs so this was being done in the early 1900s by the U.S. government, right? And then the banking world started doing it too. Obviously they were part of it. And this still continues today. If you were to look up redlining, you can still find court cases happening till this day around redlining, right? All right, so why would I put highways on here? They split up communities, they're cutting through communities. And what I was interested in is what it does to economic development, right? So if you think of 4th Street and you think of Route 66, what is the main contributor to the death of economic development on 4th and Route 66?
I-40?
Highways. Highways. Even if you think of the rural communities, plus and minuses, right? The rural community that my mother and my father are from up in northern New Mexico, Waigamam, formerly Santa Clara, the highway just goes right past Waigamam. So what it did is it fundamentally killed economic development in that rural community, right? Some rural communities, the highway goes right through it, and some rural communities, the highway just passes it. And for Waigamam, the highway just passes it. So this is and then what's attached to the highway is the FTA, right? The Federal Transportation Authority. They have amazing power of eminent domain, right? And that's something, I'm one of those nerds who went to the federal court case on the Albuquerque Rapid Transit because I wanted to hear the way that a case was argued like that, because it's almost impossible historically to beat them. So highways play a very important role in the development of our communities and how they impact them negatively or positively. And if anyone has anything to add, please raise your hand and I'll jump in.
There's something.
Yes, sir.
So if you take into consideration that Martinez Town, South Broadway, San Jose, our communities were already established before I-25, you know? And I'm sure, you know, those going east and west as well. So we were here before they were here. But like you said, that FTA is very bossy.
And I think that's the key word. Bossy, I say top down, right? They just say, we don't care what's going on, we don't care who we displace. In fact, that was happening recently within the South Broadway community. They're redesigning the freeway, and one of their proposals was to get rid of some of the houses because they were just in the way of the new design, right? And I think that what's the problem here in New Mexico with that is that people don't understand the importance and the attachment that people who are traditionally from New Mexico have to that place where they have their families, right? So what you're seeing is a conflict of cultures, right? And then we'll get to that in a minute. Let me write that down because I forgot that. Conflict of cultures and ways of life. Okay, so then, and I know a bunch of you in the room know much more than I do about this. So then the next thing we jump forward to is urban renewal. So what is urban renewal? What was someone's experience with urban renewal?
Displacement of families from the neighborhood.
So yes, it was the displacement of family from neighborhoods. This was back again to the federal government, right? This was connected to the Federal Housing and Urban Development. The Federal Housing and Urban Development thought that they were doing a good thing, and so many of our federal agencies do sometimes, in our state and local ones, and they were going to alleviate poverty. And the way that they were going to alleviate poverty, was implementing these top-down strategies. And a lot of times what this does is it created factions within our communities. And I think the easiest example to give is parelas, tortilla flats, right? Growing up, I remember there was a community, I was still, it was still around when I was alive, where the National Hispanic Cultural Center is today, right? So urban renewal helped create a lot of division as people started to fight with each other, even within our own communities, because we had different perspectives of what redevelopment looked like, and then the federal government was telling us, this is what it has to look like, right? So once again, another top-down strategy, and I want to say all these, that cause division within our communities. We allow these policies to divide us and to divide us as communities, right? Civic Plaza, why would I put Civic Plaza there? What does Civic Plaza do? I just want to say, this is another best practice of the planning world, right? This is a best practice. What does Civic Plaza do? Read this.
Cut off 4th Street.
Cut off 4th Street. It cut off 4th Street, right? And what I think most important to me is that it cut off community, right? Cut off neighbors. It cut off ways of living, right? And so, so we'll talk about that conflict of cultures again.
I just want to make a comment. You know, when you think of a lot of the historical sites, and you could go into different countries, whether it's Mexico or places in South America, because that's mainly my travels, there's the central location, Plaza de Armas. But if you look at the design, it's not cutting off people. It's a central location. We may see Civic Plaza as a centralized, but it's polarized. You know, it didn't allow for, you know, people to go through 4th Street. Now, you know, they sort of changed it. But, and I think if you could really stop to think of how we could have used, especially in the Southwest, rural and urban areas, to have taken the time to look at those, what they represented, you know, those civic areas, that it was central, but you could circulate. It didn't cut off business. It didn't cut off communication. Big, huge difference.
And I just want to piggyback on what you were saying, is that in all cultures, which we can study around the world, but specifically we'll focus on New Mexico, because we're here, right? Whether you look at, this is a complicated discussion, however you identify, Chicano, Mexicano, Native, Indigenous, there was always points of gathering, right? Whether it was the plazas, whether it was the ceremonial spaces, there was always, whether it was feast days, different ways that those are expressed, there was always spaces, there was gathering places, right? And I think, as we clashed with a different planning paradigm, the Western paradigm, we saw this becoming less community. And I think of this Pueblo woman who I visited, was working on a project, and I ended up in I won't say what Pueblo, I'll keep it private, right? And I was just hanging out with this little grandma, I felt blessed, and I was just curious. I was like, what's that big building? Because it was this brand new big building, right? And I was like, what is that crazy big brand new building? And she's like, don't get me started on it. It was their kiva, and in her opinion as an elder, the planners who had come in hadn't gone through, hadn't gone through the traditional process to kind of how you even take down a place of prayer and then how you erect one, right? So it was interesting to me because I had no idea that's what had happened. I was just being nosy about why there was this big, massive, brand new building in the middle of the community, right? So it was interesting to see her perspective on that. Then new urbanism. So that takes us into where we are today. And there's different interpretations of new urbanism, but I'd like to see if anyone has, maybe one or two people have their perspectives on new urbanism, which is the planning paradigm that's in use today within the United States and Mexico.
I think the dominant idea of new urbanism is a shift away from an automobile-centered sort of planning paradigm and back towards like a more human and alternative modes of transportation scale paradigm.
Yes, that is a rhetoric of the new urbanist. What is it called? Manifesto? Is it the new urbanist?
It's something like that. Charter.
The charter, the new urbanist charter. Manifesto is a whole other thing. Does anybody else have anything else to add about new urbanism?
It's to prevent sprawl, right? To concentrate people so that we're not using up so much resources to replenish our sewer lines and our electricity and stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot. Oh, go ahead, Frank.
I would say new urbanism is a methodology that is not necessarily widespread, but on the move around this country. I would also say that it looks mostly at the built environment. I don't necessarily think it takes into consideration the people that use that environment. Now that's my take on it.
Does anyone want to add anything else?
I think if you think about new urbanism as a humanistic approach, and you include the human beings in the definition, it has a great deal of value. But as you were just saying, if the humans are left out of the conversation, it's the same old, built environment, structure-oriented kind of planning, which takes us down a lot of rabbit holes.
I'd just like to add just one piece to it, and I also think that it doesn't take into consideration the social issues that take place in a community where this is taking place.
Okay, did I say that?
Well, I'd just like to say that it talks about walkability, but it's interesting that Martinez Town, Santa Barbara was built on walkability, but in order to get traffic through, they opened up Lomas, which was probably a one-lane road, Mountain Road, which was a road from all the way to the mountains where we had families come down and sell their chilies, their products door to door, but it was all walkable. Odilia wasn't open. It was all housing, and then we didn't have the freeways going through our neighborhood, and so I find it pretty crazy. With the way planners thought at that time and what they did to destroy the walkability that we had in this neighborhood, and then that they continue to want to destroy our neighborhood that we want as a family-friendly neighborhood.
So, oh yes, and then...
Could I just say, so I think, like I said, I think new urbanism is sort of an attempt to look at historic patterns of growth and sort of go back to those. But I think one of the major shortcomings is that it's driven by sort of this like profit-seeking and speculation that has the effect of kind of tearing apart some of the social structure of neighborhoods while focusing, like Diana said, on the built environment.
And I think that that's a good way to talk about tearing us apart, right? Because for me, I'm a little tired of fighting, you know what I mean? I will continue to do it, but I mean, Angela and I have these discussions. I'll text her like, I don't know what we're doing this all for. I'm just gonna cry and bury myself in a hole, right? and then we hang out together. But you know, I think for me, which you know, regardless of your political party, what's going on the national level, what's going on the state level, and what's going on local level, tells me that what we've been doing all these years, even new urbanism, may have been some good intentions, still is being perpetuated in the same way. It's top down, it's separating us, it's dividing us, and we're allowing it to divide us. Because I see factions and all of our, not factions, like Nick corrected me last time we were at a meeting, and I appreciate that. We have different perspectives, right? And we're allowing ourselves to be torn apart. And that's just not, as a mom, the world that I want my child to grow up in anymore. You know what I mean? So that's why we decided to do some of this work, because we thought, like, you know what, we need to come together as a community, regardless of your political party, regardless of your perspective on different issues, which may be very different from mine, but we need to start to rebuild our community, because that's the only way that the city of Albuquerque is going to be successful. Look at all the money that they're throwing into downtown, and I've been in downtown in the commercial space for now, well, in the building for 17 years, and I'm telling you, downtown has not been revitalized. In fact, I see a lot of restaurants close every single year. One of my favorite restaurants, Empanadas, just closed last year, right? They had these awesome empanadas. I was very sad when I went over one day, and the freezing cold, and they were closed due to lack of business, right? So I think, like, for us to be successful, we need to start coming together and start healing a lot of these historical wounds and traumas that have occurred, because until we do that, we're just going to continue to be in the same place, right? And then I'll end up by saying is, like, we always hear these negative statistics about New Mexico. And I love New Mexico. I lived in New York City, because I know a lot of people think that us New Mexicans don't get around, right? But I lived in New York City. and I found myself one day in Manhattan sitting in a bus stop, and I couldn't see the edges of the earth. And I was like, what the heck am I doing here? I can't even see the sunset, you know? So I came back, right? Because I may not be a millennial, but all people during that age range tend to leave and come back. Because you go away and you're like, oh no, this is not the lifestyle for me. Or maybe it is, because I want to be respectful in New York City. Some people like that lifestyle. It just wasn't for me, right? I also spent some time in Mexico City, right? So I was able to understand transportation. And you want to talk about some of the best public transportation in the world? You go hang out in Mexico City. Even so, there's subway cars at certain hours. Certain subway cars are only for women, right? So there's like safety issues and stuff like that, right? So I was like, oh, you want to see excellent public? And then you can get on one of the crazy buses where it's like crazy. And you might fear for your life. And it works. Somehow it works, right?
You've got a beautiful crowd back here. If the people speaking up there could speak a little louder.
Okay, and you guys could, there's some seats up here. Is there any more in here? Come in. There's a seat up here. Come on, there's lots of seats. There's several seats in here. Okay, well, this is just perfect timing. Awesome, thank you, Brian, thank you. Keeping us organized, because we are all volunteers. Oh, you're just one of the Okay, so something I want to talk about just
There's
before,
2 seats.
Before we get it, there's a seat up here and there's a seat right here. So something I want to get into before we get into our discussion is I hear this a lot at meetings, right? I hear this a lot over the years. And it was actually, I took some time out when I had my children. I was fortunate enough to get accepted into graduate school, and I got to live off scholarships and have babies and read a lot, right? I got to read some really great writings by Ted Hojola, who's a native indigenous planner from Estado Pueblo. He founded the Indigenous Planning Institute at the School of Architecture and Planning, right? And you know, what was interesting to me is he says, you know, a lot of times, oh, as community people, we're not about progress. Us New Mexicans, we're simple. We're simple people. We're not about progress. We don't know change. We're stuck in our old ways, right? And something that I found very profound, because I knew that was wrong, was when Hahola said, as Native Indigenous people, for us to survive today, we had to be able to adapt and change and progress, for us to even be alive today, and for our culture and our language even to be around today. Because many of the tribal people speak their language, right? They still do their ceremonies. So for them to survive hundreds and hundreds of years, they had to know how to be able to adapt. They had to know how to be able to progress. I mean, look at it. Look at how well they're doing. Look at the All-Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. How, you know, there could be some debate, some debate around some of the conversations, right? And we don't have time to go around whether you agree with casinos or whether you not agree with casinos, because that's a whole other conversation, right? But they are implementing some very effective economic development strategies, even in Zuni Pueblo that doesn't have a casino, who has a main street, and they're doing economic development based off their arts in their community and how to sell them. We look at Acoma Pueblo. Go to Acoma Pueblo and visit the most beautiful museum that I have seen in the state of New Mexico is at Acoma Pueblo. What examples will I give here? Developers did not come in and create the Sawmill Community Land Trust. Who created the Sawmill Community Land Trust?
Community. Max Romero and his wife.
In the garage. The community, right? The community came up with the Sawmill Community Land Trust and is a model used around this country and has created a whole lot of jobs for a whole lot of people. Maybe they're not from the community, maybe some of them are, but it has created a whole lot of opportunities, right? Then the next one, who created the South Valley Economic Development Center? The community. It wasn't government, and I'm sorry, it's just so I know, because I know the people. Although it was essential to have Bernalillo County as a partner, right? Because that's what helped get the funding for it. But the South Valley Economic Development Center, which is a model for economic development centers in the state, in the city, and in this country, was created by the community. And there's another example. Oh, I forgot where I live. I forgot where I live. Thanks to the amazing elders in my community who 20 years ago created the Sawmill Wells Park Sector Development Plan. So we talked about Sawmill, but let's think about Wells Park, right? Wells Park, Mountain and 12th. That old store that was there and abandoned, what did they do? They redeveloped it, and now it's one of the hottest places to eat. Cocina Azul. Very good food. Very good food, very good beans. So those, and then so you see there's that Cocina Azul. There's appropriate infill. It's appropriate in terms of height, and it fits in with our identity and our culture and our community, right? It's 2 stories, it's like a nice brown color. It's just appropriate for the area, right? So you have that little infill, and you have the New Mexico Tea Company that opened there, and now some other little shop, right? Golden Crown Panaderia, been around for 30 years. The dad, Pat, I think his name, just kept on going, even when times were difficult. That man, I have to pay a lot of respect to him because he kept it going. And you know what? Now through the Sawmill Wells Park Sector Development Plan, 20 years later, an appropriate infill development, an appropriate community-based development, the Golden Crown Panaderia has become a success story for our community. And they're on all kinds of Food Network shows. They're on like a different Food Network show, right? So the reason why I say this is because sometimes we dig ourselves in these negative numbers that we fail to see all of the amazing things that people in this room have created. Right? I think that we should be proud of that. And the last thing I'll end off in before we go on something is, you know, we always hear these negative statistics about New Mexico, which is important, right? But what we fail to talk about sometimes is that, I'll attach it to a personal story. So I'm from Wagamon, New Mexico. I was born here. But on both sides of my family, maternal and paternal, we still have the land that both my grandmothers were born in and were handed down to them, and the homes in the villages, right? Land for us was very important, and for my grandmothers, the right to make decisions on their land was very important. So they were pretty involved and active, right? So land, home ownership has always been important to us because it's getting connected to gardening and ranching and feeding our families. Because when you have 11 kids, like my grandma did, or my other one who had 8, the only way to feed your children at that time was to work your land, right? Either you go to the farms, which my grandma tried one day up in Colorado, and they're like, heck no, and they came back and they farmed their own land, right? So that is why land has always historically been important to all peoples in New Mexico. So going back to the statistic, New Mexico has always, if you look at census data, we have very high home ownership rates amongst low-income communities. Okay? So that's going to be a very important thing to remember when we go into our next discussion. So that's it with the historical overview, and then now we're going to go into an update on the comp plan. So how many of you know about the comprehensive plan and the IDO, the Integrated Development Ordinance? How many don't know? So we're not going to be able to break it all down tonight because it's very complicated, but we're going to do our best. So the Albuquerque Comprehensive Plan is a document that's done together by Bernalillo County and the city of Albuquerque. Right now it's pretty much being led by the city of Albuquerque, and it's a document that's policies of what is the vision for our community for the next 10, 20 years, right? So what housing looks like, what street design looks like, etc. Right? Now what's different about this time around is not only they say, I don't want to say, there's different language that's being used. Some say updating, some say revising, some might say total rewrite of the comp plan, right? Depends what your perspective is. We're also doing simultaneously, so I was reading this funny thing because the comp plan is over 500 pages, and someone was joking around and they were like, that's longer than the Bible, right? When I had just finished reading the over 500 page document, they came out with a new version. And I was like, first of all, it's very difficult for us to even get that version, right? Because I don't have money to pay for a color 500-page document. So it was like, we won't go into that discussion of about how I'm a working mom. I don't have time to spend at the library or the community center. We have limited community hours, right? I needed a copy so that in the nighttime, when I get my work done, because most moms in the room who are working, I should say, probably you're getting most of your work done when the kids are asleep in the nighttime, right? Or early in the morning. I'll be up, I had to stop myself from sending out emails at 5 in the morning because I thought I might start offending people, right? So I went to 8. You will get an email from me between 7:30 and 8, and you know I've been working for, not just me, but I'm sure many of them parents or grandparents in this room are working, right? So there's that. Then, they've also been the city of Albuquerque, so this is the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. Separately, the city of Albuquerque and not Bernalillo County, the city of Albuquerque has been rewriting the zoning codes, right? The zoning codes. Now, zoning codes are very important because they determine how land can be used, right? Whether it's private property or whether it's communal property. That decides how our land is used. So zoning code. And here's water up here if anyone's thirsty. Thank you to Bernadette for always thinking of us. So how many of you got this letter when you came in? A letter on Inequities. So when we started off, and then we're going to open up to discussion too. So in 2015, I had a job working under a federal grant for Presbyterian Hospital. Although I was not contracted directly through Presbyterian, it was under Presbyterian. And because Presbyterian gets all information, the order came down to send all of us out to these meetings, right? So I, along with some other people, as a part of our job at that time in 2015, were sent to go to these meetings. I, as a planner within the School of Planning, had never heard of these meetings had it not been for me being mandated to go as a part of my job. And mandated not in a bad way, in a good way. Like, I'll go send these community organizers out to the meetings, right? And then I got real interested. I was like, well, where is everybody? And I noticed that they were taking real-time surveys, right? So we started, there was a whole lot of stuff that went on. Fast forward to today. There was a lot of issues going on, because I remember the first meeting that I went to, people were given these stickers of the new zoning codes, and our task was to put them all over the city of Albuquerque where we thought appropriate. Well, people just started getting the stickers and putting them in everywhere, right? And I was like, oh, no, don't put them in Mountain View. We already have enough toxin-emitting industry in Mountain View. You know what I mean? Let's go put them in, I'm just joking around, we were joking. Let's go put them in Tanawan. You know what I mean? But people were just like, and I refused to put stickers anywhere. Because I did not want to, I felt like we didn't have enough information about each community to just be putting stickers anywhere. And I wanted to understand what the definitions of these new zone codes were, because I wanted to understand what type of uses were allowed in there, right? And I wanted to know who made up this zoning code, right? And when I was told by one of the folks, our facilitator, was oh, it's a national standard. Right? I was like, oh no. We went over the national standards earlier, right? So then we started to meet. Some of us working on pocket of poverty stuff, and we attended meetings. We went to, I stopped going to the focus groups because, like, you know, I was busy. You know, I got a job. Like, I got schoolwork. I'm trying to get to graduate school. I got babies. Like, the realities of life, right? I couldn't always go to focus group meetings. So then we ended up, I thought, okay, at this point, we'll go to EPC hearings. We would voice our concerns, and we would also give examples. We were very clear, I myself, along with other people, we did not want our sector plans taken away just like that. And the reason why, and this is just my perspective, and we all have different perspectives, right? And we're going to let other people speak as well. The reason why is because I fundamentally felt that before you could just take away a sector plan, that I should be involved from Wells Park in deciding what were the priorities for the policies that would be integrated into this comp plan. I didn't get that opportunity. And then in Wells Park, they changed our zoning. They changed our zoning without, no one told me as a property owner, I get a tax bill twice a year. I didn't get no notice. But when you got my money, then, you know what I mean? But I didn't get no notice that you were changing my zoning. You know, and then when we held a neighborhood association meeting and got a presentation, and they said, well, we made a mistake, but we're going to change it to this zoning. And we were like, but we don't want that. We don't want that. We want our zoning to remain in this particular area residential, because it's a beautiful complement. We have industry that's grandfathered in, right? Then you have residential, and then you have light commercial, right? Where the Cocina Azul and the Golden Crown Panaderias are. The point is, we weren't involved, and that was a fundamental problem for us.
Could you explain to me what a sector plan development plan is?
Okay, so basically Diana said it. A sector plan is a resident-driven plan that decides, and the residents determine, they go through this strategic planning process and visiting process and saying, okay, and then here's the issues. In 1996 was Wells Park, right? Here are some of the issues. In 20 years from now, we want it to look like this. We have this vision. For us to get to that vision, these are recommendations and zoning codes, because our sector plan has zoning codes in it, right? It's not just policy, it's zoning codes, which are legal tool or laws, right? Regulations. We have zoning codes that will hopefully help to facilitate that process of achieving successful economic development and community development, right?
I have a question. Was the way your neighborhood was laid out and what you saw there, was that a factor of why you moved to that neighborhood?
Oh, me for Wells Park? The reason why I moved to Wells Park is because I grew up in the South Valley, and for some reason, I always wanted to live in Martinez Town in Wells Park. Right? I wanted to be
You liked
around.
it how it was.
Yeah, I liked it how it was. I wanted to be a part of that culture, that history, and those traditions, right? As someone coming from a rural community, then moving to the South Valley urban rural, then wanting that, then had the extreme urban experience in New York City, Mexico City, I wanted to move to Wells Park. And unfortunately, there wasn't a home for sale at the time in Martinez Town, but we found one in Wells Park. And that's where we very happily have lived for the past 11 years, until we found out in February that we live about 2.5 blocks from a toxic plume. I'm not very happy about because it's TCE and it's in the shallow part of the aquifer. I barely found out about it last February. No one ever told me when I bought my home that I was living near a toxic plume or 2.5 blocks away. TCE, when it's in the shallow aquifer, wants to go out into the air, so it escapes as a vapor into the air, and it's connected to brain cancer, right? And some people don't understand the severity of it, and I don't have proof that there's a direct connection, but my neighbor behind me had a brain aneurysm 10 years ago, had a surgery, was successfully removed. At the end of the block, another neighbor of mine who was under the age of 35, she died of brain cancer, she has 3 kids, right? So it was very upsetting to me as someone who during my childbearing years was living there. But that's a whole other discussion that is related.
But my question is, when you were living there and paying your taxes to these people who are in charge of the government here, you were investing in that community the way it was, correct?
Yes, at that particular time, yes, I was investing in that community the way it was. Yeah. So sector plan, city versus, so I want to be very clear. So we're talking about the comp plan, right? So when we saw that there was real-time surveys that were done at these meetings, right? And I'm very thankful to the city staff, the city planners who shared this information with us because it's public. It wasn't in the comp plan, proposed comp plan or IDO, but it shows that at most of the community meetings where they tracked, 60 to 80% participation were Anglo. Latino, Chicano, Hispanic were 15% and below, which is not very good considering that the population of Bernalillo County is close to 50% Hispanic, Chicano, Latino, Mexicano, however you identify, right? And I think the most shocking one to me was the event that was held at the Tractor Brewery. It was for millennials, right? 75% were Anglo, millennials. That is shocking to me because any event that I know, when I look at the poets in the room, you go to an event at Tractor Brew, you go to events that are geared towards that generation, and I would say 50 to 60 to 70 to 80% are Native American, Mexicano, Chicano, a very diverse mix, right? I just didn't understand how could you have a millennial event, which is a younger age group, and it be 75% Anglo. 0% Native American was shocking to me, right? Especially because I know so many urban Native youth who live here, right? So when we started looking at this, and we were attending all these EPC hearings on the comp plan, and then the Loops hearing, when we were talking about sector plans, talking about these nerdy sector plan issues, or all these technical things, we don't feel, and I understand there's different perspectives, but I'm just speaking as our perspective, we don't feel that we were listened to. So then we were like, oh, let's get that data on those real-time surveys, and let's point out issues of inequity, because that is bad. In a state like New Mexico, in a county like Bernalillo, we should not have those sorts of numbers, right? So when that was brought up at that city council meeting, there was a lot of contention. You can look at the videos because we videotaped them, right? And we also accessed them online. They thought it was, I think they were ready to pass it. You know what I mean? There was going to be heard the first time, and the second time was going to be passed. But then, after this conversation, we had requested a 2-year deferral. You can read about it in the letter, what you have. We were given a 6-week deferral, right? March 6th is when they'll be hearing the comp plan again, right? There were only 2 city councilors who did not vote for the deferral. Those 2 city councilors were Councilor Pat Davis did not vote for the deferral, and Councilor Don Harris did not vote for the deferral. The 2 co-sponsors of the resolution that started the comp plan and the IDO are Councilor Isaac Benton and Councilor Trudy Jones. So I'm going to push this forward. One of the issues that we had was the messaging A, B, C to Z, vision your future. Not really sure what that means, you know what I mean? I think there could have been better language around messaging that really resonates with people, right? A, B, C to Z, poor messaging. Nobody's fault. It happens a lot in the messaging world, right? How could hundreds of meetings were held. Hundreds of meetings were held, and we're actually going through the list of participants, and we're seeing that a lot of those numbers are repeat people, the same people who've gone to the meetings, and I would be thankful to some of the community members who are doing that hard work. But we want to know in terms of outreach, why wasn't notifications sent in our tax bills, which we get twice a year, and in utility bills, because it's water, electricity. We don't want to just inform just property owners, but renters as well. How are we capturing renters, right? Some renters pay electricity, some renters pay gas. Could we have worked with apartments to get notification, right? Because renters' rights are being somewhat eliminated. So outreach. We already talked about sector plans. Want to be clear that only the city within the comp plan, because remember it's the city and the county has to approve the comp plan too, and not just the city. Only the city is eliminating sector plans. Now they're saying that 90% of the sector plans are incorporated into the comp plan, but some of us in the room have different perspectives on that, right? But I want to be clear, the county in the unincorporated areas is not doing away with their sector plans, right? That's very clear in the comp plan. So the county in the unincorporated areas is not doing away with their sector plans, whereas the city is, but they say that 90% of it is integrated and that the staff went through and selected what were the priority policies, and et cetera, right? Myths. I think there's a lot of myths that have been coming out in the Albuquerque Journal lately. It's so confusing. It's so confusing. There's so many sector plans. It's adding a lot of confusion. For who? There's 64 sector plans, and this is from Beaver's research, and we have a lot of issues with some of the research that's coming from Beaver. I went to their presentation, but I had to leave early because I had to go to work. But 64 of those 64 sector plans, only 5 overlap. Of those 5, 2 overlap 3 times, and the other 2 overlap 52 times, right? So we have some recommendations for how that can be cured. Stopping development. Oh, you crazy community people. Stopping development. Can't you see all the development outside that you're stopping? I mean, just look at downtown. See all the development that you're stopping? Let's really think about that. I've never seen so much development growing up in the city of Albuquerque. Right? Whether it's the Vado Hotel, whether it's the Route 6, the Albuquerque Rapid Transit, we're not here to debate that. Whether it's that new development, the redevelopment that's happening at Broadway and Central, you know, Presbyterian Hospital.
We got Casa Azul, we got Starbucks.
Oh, yeah. so there's a lot of development going on. So some of us are a little confused into how all of this is stopping development. So there's 2 last things, and we're going to open up for discussion around people's perspectives on the comp plan. Other key issues that we just don't have time to talk about tonight, but we want to bring up is now our communities are being put into these categories of, oh, this is an area of change, this is an area of consistency. Well, I want to know who made that decision. Who made that decision in terms of this is an area of change and this is an area of consistency, right? Because I went to those meetings. Density. We need to have a very thoughtful discussion about what density means to us here in Albuquerque. Not what density means in New York City, not what density means in San Francisco, or Austin, or Phoenix, because people like to compare us to Phoenix. Don't compare us to Phoenix, please don't. Let's talk about what does density look like for us as people in Bernalillo County, right? So we need to have a definition of density, like mixed use. Well, there's nothing new about mixed use. All I got to do is look at some of the pueblos, and mixed use has been occurring for many, many hundreds of years, right? And everybody, is, you know, another trend, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but how are we being thoughtful and intentional and unique about mixed use here in Bernalillo County, right? So these are a lot of issues that we don't unfortunately have the time to go into, but we wanted to recognize that those exist, right? So I'm going to stop there, and I don't know if people have, because we all have different perspectives. I know the histories of different communities in the room, right? Hey, I come from Wagum, a small town of 360 people now, and there's definitely different perspectives in that community, right? So I want to see, is there any questions that people have or comments?
I just want to say one thing is, Bianca's used some terminology. There's some big words there that unless you're a planner or have been reading this book, she's speaking Asian, she's speaking Chinese,
Hey, wait, hold on a second.
Vietnamese.
Hold up here. Hold up, we're gonna have a conversation about equity.
She's speaking a language that a lot of us that are just community owners, homeowners, apartment owners, we don't understand this. And they've got this document that's 500 pages that what they want us to read and then understand and then comprehend and then apply so that we can have questions that we know are valuable questions. If you don't understand it, how can you even ask a question?
But just to let you know that the mixed use is saying that it's going to be up to 4 stories high of apartments and commercial uses. So, I mean, it doesn't go into like, say if you want to do a mixed use community where you have residential single family, townhomes, duplexes, senior housing, so that if people get older, they can move into this senior housing in the same neighborhood. And you could look at Sawmill, like Bianca said, is an example of how they have single family, but if you wanted to go into senior housing, you could go into senior housing, or you could go into the workforce housing where you could live and work there. And then they have apartments, but also that it doesn't take care of, the mixed use doesn't take care of our identity. It doesn't take care of making sure that buildings aren't 4 stories high, that they're 2 stories. Our houses are single family dwellings, they're not higher than 2 stories. Some are just lower than that, it's just 1 story, but most of them are 1 story. And then the density that we have 500 square feet homes up to 900 square feet homes. So we know what density is, we know how that works. But the type of density they want is to, and the zoning says, you do not want to, it's not allowed currently to allow a high concentration of people in one area for a specific reason, because there's sanitary issues, crime issues, and then are they using, the other issue is that they could gentrify your neighborhood and make these apartments so high you can't even live in them because they're so expensive, like in San Francisco, where they're buying these apartments out, and people that have historically lived there can no longer live there. It's too expensive. They have to move way out of the city to live in there. And so we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, and that they're using our public dollars, our dollars that we pay taxes, to allow these types of development.
So I don't know if anyone wants to add, and you know that this is a space where people can have different opinions, and it's okay, right? So I don't know if anyone wants to add anything. That's a very important issue that Loretta brought up. We're very worried about the concentration of poverty in certain communities, right? Again.
Bianca, one of the things I think that folks need to know is the sector plans were community driven, and a lot of them took years and years to get passed. So to wipe them away, I think, is problematic.
And just to be fair, I'm just going to say that the city will say that 90% of the sector plans were integrated into comp plans. So our issue is twofold. One, that neighborhoods were not in part of the process of that, determining what were the priorities, and we don't believe, as far as the Wells Park Sawmill sector plan is concerned, that we are a part of that 90% number.
So what's the delivery mechanism for all the community to get the comp plan?
Yeah, that's
Is there a limited number of them? Is it in the library only? Is it on
internet? How can
internet?
you get a copy of the comp plan, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, how do you get it,
So I will answer to the best of my ability. So there is comp plans available at all the public libraries, right? And all public libraries have different times of operation, right? You can also get a copy of the proposed zoning codes. So you can go to the library. Technically, you're not supposed to leave with it. I mean, like, you're supposed to return it. It's just like a few-hour checkout, right?
For 500 pages.
And the planning department, but I know when we put in a request, because we were asked to request from our city councilor, and our city councilor, policy analyst was very responsive. We wanted 10 copies. We were told we could only have one, right? So we went and picked up our one, and then about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, we were sent an email that they have another copy and we could go and pick that up. But right at that time, when we went and picked up that copy, the new one came out.
So it's not in PDF form,
It is in PDF form. It is in PDF form.
but you can't make a copy.
Well, you can make a copy, but you really want to have it in color. And
Well,
so-
what I mean is, you can't take a thumb drive and make a copy.
Yes, you can.
It's online now.
Download it from off
Okay.
their website.
It's abc-z.com.
And then one more question, I'll let him. So, I'm taking that the comp plan does not have a glossary of terms.
It does have a
It
lot.
does.
So it defines all of these
But you need
language.
to go to the current one and then compare the current one to the new one.
Yeah, that's really the best thing to do. You want to print, and I don't know who, I mean, just in reality, I go to Kinko's a lot, unfortunately, because Valiant closed. So to print a black and white copy at Kinko's is 15 cents per copy, black and white, right? So to do color, I think it's about 60-some cents. And you really need the IDO and the comp plan. Really, the IDO you need in color. If you want to look at the zoning maps or any maps, you need it to be done in color. So yes, it's available at libraries, it's available at community centers, it is online at the website, you can look it on the computer, not everybody has access to the internet, right? So you can, there are different ways that you can go around and get the document.
Yeah, just very quickly, on the Santa Barbara Martinez Town Neighborhood Association website, if you go under History and Preservation, there is links to the IDO and to the comp plan. And as any other big and important document, including the Bible, since it was brought up earlier, you don't just read the Bible from front to cover and then I'm done. You probably read section by section, you go to working groups like these, and you get to learn what the document really means. But if you needed to print any section, I believe, maybe somebody can correct me, but I believe it's in chapter 3, where all the priorities from all the sector plans have all been listed. All 3 of ours, which are meaningless to this neighborhood, are included. And for every single goal that was in each one of the sector plans that are being referenced, they are referenced further into the document, into what section deals with the goals of each one of the sector plans. So it's a little bit of a noodle conversation, but whatever I said, just go to our website and there's the links under local history and preservation.
Okay, good, thank you. Richard and then, Richard and then Jesse. Sorry, Richard, Jesse, and then the lady in the back. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Well, tonight,
Go ahead, Jesse.
well, we brought up before at a meeting as our neighborhood association. I live here in Martinez Town, right here on Walter, Northeast. It's been a house for as long as I've been here, my wife's life generation. But I brought up the fact that right now, all the business owners are paying residential property taxes. So, my question was, if they do change ours, because right now we want to change this to commercial. C1, C2, I think it is, right? So my question is, talking about gentrification. Once they raise these taxes or changes to commercial, are we going to pay property taxes on commercial rates or residential? And if they do raise it to commercial, that's going to put out a lot of poor innocent people, I'd say, you know, because they won't be able to afford these property taxes.
So I just want to say that we're keeping track of the questions that I don't have, that some of us don't have the answers to, because we're going to go to our city councilors and to the planners and ask them these questions. And just want to appreciate the planners who are here and the city representatives who are here. Richard, do you want to go?
Yeah, I just wanted to just remind the folks that are here, and I think many of the people that are in this room this evening, previous to sector development plans, what we were doing was we were having meetings in all of the locations. Now I'm talking about the 60s and the 70s. And we were talking about then envisioning your community. Huh? Now that wasn't sanctioned by the city of Albuquerque, nor did we ask the city of Albuquerque to sanction it, because during that time the city was not listening to what the concerns of the community were at that moment and still are today at this moment. So sector development plans are very, very important. Now on the comprehensive plan, who made the decision? of what the priorities, because some would say that some of the recommendations from the sector development plans then were included in the comprehensive plan. The question is, who made that decision about what the priorities are? And did the community participate in deciding for itself what the community felt was the priorities of what should be included in that? The other comment that I'll make is that I think for many of us, we're getting a little tired, and I'm speaking for myself, I don't want to speak for anybody in this room, but I am speaking for going to the city council and asking city councilors over and over again to hold up a process that is attempting to be pushed down our throat. I'm using the language that I use, I'm not speaking for anybody in this room, but and things that are being pushed down our throat without the proper time for community engagement into the process. Now that's very, very important for us that have seen some of these things happening over and over again, and we got some good city councilors, so I'm not blasting here tonight all the city councilors or that kind of thing. The last point is that why is it so important to push down our throat this comprehensive plan when the community has not had the opportunity to totally participate in engaging all the comments that were made, 500 pages, the library, this kind of thing over and over again? Who is making the decision for us as community members about what we want, what we don't want, what we'd like to see, and what we'd like to have? So then based upon that, we have requested of the city council for an extension of time. Now that's not, at the end of the day, for me, then that's not a wrong question to be asking or anything else, because if we've said, in fact, that there hasn't been the proper time, and the city will say, well, hey, we had these hundreds of meetings. I'm not here to badmouth the city planning department or anyone else. Anybody that has been living and working in these communities for as long as we have know, in fact, that it's very difficult to get community people out for meetings. We got to admit that for ourselves, and we know what those challenges are. So with that then, how do we, and you can see tonight's meeting, how in fact do we engage in our communities to make them aware of the sense of urgency that's in this comprehensive plan and going to be making decisions for us? Identification is a key question to all of us. We would like to see those that want and choose to live in historical communities surrounding this downtown area. We would like to see them make the decision, in fact, whether they want to live here or whether they want to sell their property or whether they want to move someplace else. Not because somebody put a plan together and made decisions for us that forces us, because of property taxes and other things, that forces us out of our community. So I think that's very, very crucial to the discussion that we're having this evening.
And then the lady in the back with the red jacket.
Yes, and the other problem too on these high-rise apartment buildings is that apparently there's one going up in the 8th and Silver area by the old gas company across from the water station, and it's supposed to be a 104-unit apartment, three stories, I think, maybe 4, with only, and it'll hold over 100 people, but only have parking for 50. Where are those other cars going to go?
In the neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah. Go to people's houses.
We don't have a police force that can handle the density. We could barely, I have a shop in Old Town, we can't even get somebody out there for a theft in under 2 or 3 or 4 hours if they even show it off. So why is the city so anxious to do this? Again, the same question, and shove it down our throats with a police force that can't handle it. We do not have the safety, our safety is primary.
Okay, so I see all the hands, thank you so much. So then we're gonna go to Diana, and then we're gonna go to the lady over here with your hand up, the one with the black jacket, and then the lady over there with her hand up with the scarf, and then the man over there, and then, and then at that point, and then we'll end over here, and then we'll Loretta, you're gonna have to remind me, at that point, and I feel bad doing this, but this just goes to show the importance of this conversation, but I'm going to have to end, once we go to those people who have their hands up, this part, because we're going to have to go into the recommendations and next steps before we leave this meeting, right? Because I don't want anyone leaving today thinking that we're just a bunch of complainers and we don't have solutions, because we do. In fact, we have a whole lot of language written up. There's only so much we can do in 6 weeks.
So, for me, sector plans are the sacred thing for us. Because as Richard says, that is the only resident-driven document, planning document that we have. I've worked in the South Broadway neighborhood, and at one time I was head of the zoning code group. We had lots of things that were happening in South Broadway where people wanted to do things. It's a neighborhood that's centrally located. People want to develop. But as a result of our sector plan, we were able to step in and say, we're not against your development necessarily, but can you work with us to shape it so it comes to scale of our neighborhood, so that it fits in. If it doesn't fit in, then we're probably going to use our sector plan to say, that's probably not a good idea for us. It doesn't work for our neighborhood because the residents have said so. So people are asking right now, Bianca, when is this, how can I get a copy? How can I do this? It's a little late almost for that because there's a vote coming up at the city council on March 6th. So I'm not sure where we're going to go with that because really March 6th is just around the corner. It's within days from now. So the question is, are we going to have our city listen to the community and say, we need to give some special consideration, particularly to the old historic neighborhoods, and I don't mean just around downtown, because there are some historic neighborhoods that are west, that were some of the first neighborhoods that started on the west side. They too have a lot of historic issues going on. We want to preserve our sector plans, at least until we can be assured that everything that the residents thought about at that time, at the time they were made, and any improvements that we'd like to make, because I'm not saying we have perfect sector plans. There are some improvements that need to be made. Ours is a very old sector plan in South Broadway, probably in the 30 years old. But there are some things that people hold to, and you talk to our East San Jose people that are just south of South Broadway, they would say they need protection from environmental issues. So those are the things that we have to look at. So I don't know where we're going to go with this. I know we have recommendations. The other thing that I'm concerned about is if we lose our sector plans, my understanding is that a lot of this work is going to go to an administrative process. So that development decisions are going to be made in an administrative process, not necessarily by someone from our neighborhoods making an argument before the zoning hearing examiner and getting a fair take and having the community side, the developer side, and then have an arbiter there that makes a decision as to findings, as to what works, and bringing the developer and the neighborhood together. So I think that we have to figure out, we've got some suggestions, but we're going to have to get some real support from our city council to make this happen and do it in a way that's going to make an impact on this process.
Okay, great, thank you, Dennis. Then we have, and could you remind me of your name?
Amanda.
Amanda, sorry.
I'm South Broadway.
Yes, sorry.
And my big deal, I'm from the South Broadway area too, is environmental, because I have multiple chemical sensitivity. But my question is, we're all sitting here and we're expected to know this 500-page document and to make our recommendation on it. How well do the city councilors know it? Are they going by the recommendation of the people who put it out there? Or are they reviewing it and looking at it and going through it too? That's my question.
So I think that that's an important question that we would have to ask as city councilor, and I'm not going to do it right now because they're not all here. I want to be fair to all of them. How many city councilors have actually read the proposed comp plan and not only read it, but compared it to the existing comp plan and then the IDO and compared it to the zoning code, right?
And all the sector plans and area plans.
I think
Because
that I
they mean a lot to us.
I think you read it.
Okay, so then we're going to go to the gentleman with the glasses in the back over there, and then the lady with the scarf, and then the other lady with the scarf over here, and then Loretta, and then we're going to have to move on.
I have a flyer I want you to have. I'm going to pass it up. I have a first-person story about that particular flyer. My only question is, the two city councilors that you named, is there anyone here that is in their districts?
Oh, the which city councilors? Pat Davis and
Right.
John Harris? Oh, I am, yeah. Oh, yeah, and the uphill folks are here. Okay, so ABQ's future is calling, the city needs to hear from you. This is one of the flyers. Okay, so I'm gonna take it over to the, and I'm sorry, I don't know names, lady in the green scarf.
Hi, my name's Anita Cordova. I live here in Martinez Town, Santa Barbara, and I'm completely dismayed by the lack of inclusive involvement in this letter that you've all pointed out to us. Very grateful for that. And I have to admit I'm completely conflicted by these conversations. I've been in this room for the last 10 years nursing children who will be 6 and 9 next month, literally. And we come up with plans, and we come up with plans, and we talk about it. I go to the bigger meetings, and the warehouse guys with their suits come in, and everything gets thrown on its head and changes. So while I am totally in support of inclusion, I moved here so that my kids could speak Spanish. I'm adding to the cultural language of our neighborhood. We fight very hard to speak our language, to do everything we do to give back. But I'm tired of the disinvestment that these kind of conversations allow in our community. Disinvestment is what I've been seeing in this community. When I moved in it 10 years ago, the 10-year sector plan wasn't completed. I participated in a process that created the next 10-year sector plan that never got started. And I've seen some great improvements. I'm looking at Councilor Benton right now, and I want to thank him for some of the improvements I've seen in our neighborhood. Sidewalks, parks, and other things that have made living for my children and myself a lot better. I walk to work, it's wonderful. And yet I still remain very concerned with some of the conversations and issues in this room that I don't need to repeat. But I'll say it again. I am very, very disheartened by the disinvestment that this community experiences. And I somehow feel, well, I'm warmed and touched by this conversation that I have been a part of for over a decade now. And I love a good fight, and I'm conflicted by where I'm supposed to put my energy. Because do we stand up for the fight and allow the disinvestment to continue? Or, I mean, how do we bridge the gap here? Because I, for one, need to build onto my house because I didn't know I had kids when I moved into it. It was like a mansion when I moved in, and all of a sudden it's like a loft. I don't know what happened. It just is not big enough. And we need to build on, and that's really not an option. I moved in at the Bernalillo County tax lightning. I was paying more taxes in my neighborhood than anybody else in Tramway and other areas, and yet the disinvestment in this community continues. And I'll tell you, as a Latina with a very passionate voice, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to put my fighting words. And I'm going to say that in this room because I'm conflicted. And I want next steps and recommendations that acknowledge that and create a plan that are going to make a difference for my children, and not just spend the next 10 years where he's driving me to the next meeting we come to.
Yes, other lady with green scarf. What's your name? Janet. So I just would like to break it down, and maybe this needs recommendations, and I'm sure many of us have had the same experience. When we say, just go to the city council meeting, it's a joke. I mean, for one thing, you can't find it. I went there 20 years ago, and because of whatever, I haven't been there a long time, I forgot how to get there. Luckily found Don Schrader and followed him. It's a joke, and then you get there, they don't get to your item until like 2 or 3 hours later. I've got kids sitting there with me who are hungry. I think the whole process of going to, and if you want to sign up to speak, you got to get there before 5. Most people work till 5 at least. So I would hope in our recommendations we can get to like some of these. You're talking about the white people showing up, and it's like, that's a lot of work to get there. It's like, that's the people who are most privileged. And if you're working and you've got kids, it's really hard to find. So I would hope that we can just break down some of those mechanisms about how our work is working.
Definitely. Thank you. I want to appreciate everyone sharing your comments. We may have different opinions, but obviously look at the turnout tonight. Right? Look at the and this was by all volunteers, very little to no money, right? So could you imagine if our volunteers had money just to do outreach, the amazing work that we could do in bringing community out, right? If we worked together in partnership, because I gotta give respect to the planners, right? Planners are only carrying out top-down orders. Let's be honest, right? So I want to be respectful and thankful to those people who showed up, and for all of you who are sharing your opinions. Then we're going to have our last comment because Lorena had been waiting for a while, and then we're going to go into recommendations and next steps.
What Richard said and what Diana said, that the comprehensive plan is a general plan for the whole city of Albuquerque. The sector plan is also a comprehensive plan. It includes our history of a small area that we call South Broadway or Martinez Town. There's no way that 500-page could include all 64 sector plans and all area plans in it, and include that comprehensive work that was done on each sector plan in that plan. There's no way. Like they're calling my area the railroad ward. That isn't what it was. It was agricultural. So they got it wrong totally right away. So the history, you lose the name, the legal boundaries, you lose everything in that general plan. there's no way it can keep our identity. We lose our character, everything in this plan.
And I'm so sorry to do this because I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions because I've gone to some neighborhood association meetings where there's some very different opinions, right? Even within our own. But so that we can get to recommendations and next steps, we're going to have to move forward. So the next, Robert is our next banner.
Go, Robert.
Is our next recommendation.
Go, Robert.
Filipino Chicana.
Okay, so a lot of this conversation has been turning towards our recommendations. As I've been writing down, tabulating everyone's questions and comments and feelings about what's going on with the comp plan, and just trying to synthesize what we're going to do next. And I know the recommendations and next steps are pretty much kind of the same, but for us, we see 4 things that are really kind of salient for all of us in this group and in this room. So we have this letter in which we outline some of our key referrals to the City Council and to the City of Albuquerque. I'll just go through all 4 of those. We are asking for a deferral of the comp plan so we can participate in a more inclusive process by 24 months. And that's not to say that we're not, like, how do we say it? Cooperative around that number specifically. Like, I think that has some room and some wiggle room. We want to be able to work and develop a working group of representatives composed of multiple diverse stakeholders from the community, which, if you look at this room, with that, it's amazing stuff. To initiate a culturally significant and effective strategic community-based development plan that includes an outreach plan with clear messaging. We require and ask that all City Council staff planners, the Director of Planning for the City of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County, the Mayor for the City of Albuquerque, and all Albuquerque City Council members in Bernalillo County, County Commissioners participate in anti-racism training specific to the history of the land use and zoning in the Southwest and specific to the history of New Mexico. And lastly, we ask to meet with concerned community members submitting this letter to discuss additional solutions to identifying players in the community. So right now, that's the main tool we're using as our communication piece. We're also working on recommendations and amendments that a small committee has been working on, and if you raise your hands, who's working on that specifically? I know there are a few people in this room. Anybody? Renee's working on it. Yeah. Elizabeth, Renee, thank you so much for doing that. I just saw some of the documents today. That was a lot of hard work, so thank you. And then the letter we're asking for. Oh. So lastly, we want to know. We were taking a lot of your questions on what we would like to ask the City Council. We know what we have in our hands today, but we want to know specifically what you want to ask on March 6th at City Council at whenever we go during the agenda. What would you like to hear, or what questions would you like to ask of your City Council, in addition to some of the questions you've already asked us tonight?
And something we left out of this version of the letter, but we want to include in the next version of the letter of recommendation, is that if we were able to get this deferral, where Robert said, hey, we're willing to compromise because it shouldn't be based on a timeline, it should be based on a work plan that's going to involve the timeline, right? But we think that appropriate notification should be sent in people's tax property bills, and as well as the utility bills, all utility bills, right? And we can maybe figure out something with renters, because we feel that we need to be a lot of justice to renters as well. So we definitely want to beef up the public notification.
Can I make this, isn't there a moratorium on right now, the comp plan?
No.
It's no longer?
No, it's just deferred.
I have a question, because I went to a LUPS meeting where there is a moratorium.
No, so they were,
So that's a good question. Can we clarify?
Because, can we ask Councilor Benton, is there a moratorium?
That's a very, very limited moratorium that has to do just with the 4th Street corridor plan, and only one zone within that plan because of disappointment of the community in what has been built under that plan today, under the existing plan. So that really doesn't have a lot to do with the comp plan effort. Just if I could clarify one thing for everybody, I've been wanting to just listen. But in terms of the process, and in terms of our zoning system, the comp plan is our policy. All right, that's our community-wide city-county policy. The sector plans contain policy, And the staff has tried to roll those into the comp plan. But the regulatory stuff, the thing about mixed use, or how tall can you build, or how dense can it be, or how many parking spaces are required, that's all within the development ordinances, which in the old days was just the zoning code. And that was something that goes back to the 1950s, did not serve us well, in my opinion. But also in the sector plans is regulatory language. So that's just kind of, that's the cart and the horse. So I guess I would say that the horse, is our community-wide policy, and the cart is the regulatory structure. Whether today or what we have today, that's the way it is pretty much. And whatever we do going forward. So that's when we're talking about the IDO, that's the regulatory part of it. That would come after the comp plan. So when we talk about a 24-month deferral, we're not going to get to the regulatory part until we finish the policy part.
Councilman Benton, well, those of us that have been working on it understand that there's policy in the comprehensive plan and regulation zoning in the EDO.
Right, I didn't hear that presented to the room.
I guess the only thing is that what I want everybody to understand too, that there's an ordinance included in the agenda that was deferred from last month that changes the comprehensive plan language. I mean, the language in all the ordinances to areas of change and to areas of consistency. So that means a lot, because area of change and consistency changes our character and identity of who we are. Right. And to me, we should not be changing established urban, developing urban, because those really give us our character in our areas, rural areas of our areas in the city of Albuquerque. And when you change it, and area consistency doesn't mean nothing for Martinez Town. Because once you say that my house is going to be 4 stories high and allow any type of commercial, that's area change for me. So somebody needs to really define that very well, because it doesn't mean a thing for my neighborhood. It's saying that I'm going to be totally changing the whole community when you're saying that the zoning is allowing that type of uses in my neighborhood.
The entire Martinez Town. Can I respond, please?
Okay, I just want to say this. We're going to have to move forward in the agenda, because we started off the meeting by saying that this would be a space for neighbors to speak, right? So I'm going to have to stop. I'm going to have to stop you two.
I want to hear what this committee is.
All of it, because we give it that ordinance. I'm going to talk about it in a minute, okay? So everybody needs to stop for a minute, because then we're going to leave and we're not going to get to these recommendations and we're not going to get to the next steps. Because what the next steps could be is maybe we could have a panel discussion with Councilor Ben and with Loretta talking about the different perspectives, because it's okay. So I don't mean to be disrespectful to Councilor Ben, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to Loretta either, but unfortunately, and this happens a lot to me because I know some of you know me, I will have to take us through the agenda, because then we're going to leave here without accomplishing this. And there's nothing worse to me than not accomplishing this, right? So I appreciate Councilor Ben and Loretta, your perspective, and I think what it flags to me is the need to continue to have these conversations, because like I was explaining to a hearing officer the other day at a hearing on a zoning code, is that planning documents like the comprehensive plan is open to interpretation. It's like having a bunch of lawyers in a room and we all interpret the planning document in different ways, right? Just like zoning codes, even laws are open to interpretation depending on what political perspective you come from. So let's have an honest conversation about it. So we're going to get us, sorry you guys, we're going to get us back to the recommendations. So what Robert was asking you is, what are we asking the city council for? From here, are there any new ideas? Only recommendations. Elizabeth.
Well, you had called on me earlier, and what my question was is, where are they getting this idea that everybody wants to go live in an apartment? That all these millennials want to live in an apartment. I'm a parent of a millennial. I coached millennials. I was a room parent for millennials. I was a Cub Scout leader for millennials. I've talked to them. That's what I do. I talk to kids. I know these kids. They still come see me. My son is a millennial. None of them, not one of them, move to an apartment? They live with us. They live with us till they can get a job and get out, and they bought a house or rented a house. This data that they've got is skewed. It's wrong. It doesn't apply here. And why are we getting data from someplace else and trying to put it here? It reminds me, this is short, Bianca, don't cut me off. It reminds me, I'm from Alamogordo, I'm from the southern part of the state. It reminds me of when one of my friends married a cowboy, moved on a ranch, and she told me, in Washington, they found out we don't have outhouses on our ranch, out in the boonies. And they were gonna make the law that every 5 miles, these ranchers had to put in an outhouse. Now, come on, all of us who live out here, what do you do when you have to go to the bathroom? You don't go looking for an outhouse, right? That's what's wrong with this.
Well, let me ask you a little bit, so what recommendation would you have? Based on your question, what recommendations would you have?
I would say that they need to make this apply to a city that's in a sandy environment. Our ground here is an old riverbed or ocean bed, whatever it is. It's made out of sand. I took a planning class when I was in college in the 70s, and everybody was going, oh my God, what have we done? We've let the Los Angeles model take over. Oh my God, everything is sprawl. We don't have a central area anymore. We need to look at Manhattan. But Manhattan is built on a rock. They can get to bedrock in just a couple of feet. They can build a building. What are you gonna do here? You're gonna keep digging. The guy who built the Imperial Building came to the city and said, I can't put a foundation down. I have to keep on digging down because there's so much sand. Why are we not dealing with reality? Why aren't we dealing with New Mexico?
That's
my problem.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, so I had you first, and then Fabian, and then you in the front. So
I don't know if it's the case or not, but I'm concerned about if the environmental impact assessment is still going to be part of the comprehensive plan, that's done before they do any building environmental.
That's a very good question.
If the environmental impact assessment is still going to be done before they approve any type of development.
That's a great question.
Very basic.
Fabian?
Are they gonna look at west side density increases with the viability of another Rio Grande crossing? Because if you don't do that, it's ridiculous. All you're doing is condemning people to torture and gridlock. Worse than it is now.
Bianca, did you get that one, or did you repeat?
I got it.
And then question in the front, or comment in the front?
Yeah, so I have a question. So, I can't remember the exact language, but in the comp plan, so they're saying that the sector plans are in the comp plan for the most part. And then, how to address what the sector plans were is addressed, and I can't remember the exact specific term, but it was the idea that each sector plan was going to be revisited once in a 5-year cycle. And then, so it seems like the question is really, like, what protections are your neighborhoods and your sector plan going to have? That's what I have.
Repeat that again.
So, what protections, or what's the mechanism for protecting what you want to protect? Because that seems to be the big issue tonight, is that there is
None. The city will say that the zoning covers it and the...
No, I'm sorry, it is the
This is your question to the city council, right?
To the city council, right?
Yeah.
Well,
That's a
it's
good
not
question.
just my question, it just seems like that is the question.
And a question we could
generally,
ask.
That we have a process problem and a language problem.
And I feel bad saying that because I know some of us have maybe a response, but for time's sake, what this likes to me is maybe we set up another meeting where we invite people, like I was saying, so I'm just picking on Councilor Ben and Loretta for a moment because I know them and I feel comfortable like I can do that, right? I'm sure Councilor Ben is sick of seeing me. I'm also sick of seeing me. Everywhere he goes, poor guy, there he is. It's kind of true, right? So maybe these are fun panel discussions that we can have with different perspectives, right? Because I will give that credit to Nick to that, because I was saying factions, and she was like, let's not use the negative language of factions, let's use different perspectives, right? Okay, so any Back to you, Robert.
Any more recommendations? Okay, we have three along as well. Gilbert.
What plans for services are in these comp plans? Because Martineztown has been a stepchild of this city since I was a kid. The lady spoke about services for her young children. Too bad that we don't have jackrabbits anymore because they built the whole tower. That's all we use for recreation.
Can we add the word community to that question? Community?
And I think you may be addressing infrastructure, like sewers and gutters and that kind of stuff, because I know this area does have some issues with that.
Well, we have a plan that's supposedly in 2006 was $80 million to deal with the flooding, but we don't know now what it's going to cost, and they still haven't dealt with it.
Camille.
We asked for a deferral, right? Okay, along with that deferral, then there should not be any applications accepted for commercial development. Because I've been in meetings where developers will come and complain, well, we're ready to go. And they'll say, oh, well, come, certain council people will say, oh, well, just come and talk to me. Well, you come and talk to me individually, and there goes that development, and that's not equitable.
And something real quick I wanted to address that we forgot to, I'm trying to remember. So there was ordinance last time that was brought up to the city council meeting. There was also an ordinance that was proposed along with a lot of this. It's called Ordinance 01627. And the way that we had a lawyer, we sent it to a lawyer because we have some lawyers who are volunteering their time as a land use lawyer, and the way that he interpreted it was that basically if this ordinance passes, that even though the comp plan still has to be approved by the county, that this ordinance would call for the implementation right away of the new comp plan if it is approved just by the city. We find that a little concerning because how can you implement a comp plan just because it got approved by the city and hasn't yet gotten approved by the county? So it's very important that we talk at some point about the ordinance. And then Ms. Martinez.
And you'll be the last one, so we have 10 minutes.
I just think a big key issue here is, back to what was said earlier, I think there are out-of-state developers that are taking over this comp plan. Tell me if I'm wrong.
You're right.
Except one. And why can't we use our local professionals here who can relate to our customs, our cultures, what we want? They can come in and build whatever they want. They're going to block our mountain view, our rising of the sun and our setting of the moon. We don't want that. So why, from the top to the bottom, are they making these decisions for us? We don't want out-of-state developers. Who made that decision? I want to ask them, why are they bringing out-of-state developers to do all this we don't want?
Thank you. So I apologize, we have 10 minutes left, and like Bianca said, we want to be rigorous around time and respectful of your schedule tonight. Here's the deal. If you have more questions, here's the email I need you to send it to. It's info, I-N-F-O-N-H, N-A, that's Historic Neighborhood Alliance, abq.org. So please send your questions to those. We need to get down to the next steps. So the next steps are, all of you have letters in your hand. You have, has everyone signed up onto the sign-in sheet tonight? Yes. No. Here's the deal what's going to happen. So we're going to send out communication after this night and ask that you sign on to the letter so that we can present that to City Council. And then we're going to ask, lastly, that you attend City Council on March 6th.
It's at 5 o'clock, and I'm sorry because we're gonna maybe we'll go into discussions with some of the counselors, because I know there's other counselors who are working with community members and city planners. Maybe we can plan another meeting like this, but it all depends on the deferral, right? So March 6th, it starts at 5 o'clock. If you want to sign up to speak, it's the first for general comment. It's the first 30 people. Sign up opens at 4:30. The past few times we've gone, sign up because there was other very important issues on the agenda. It was gone by, I got there last time at 4:50 and general comment was already filled. It's the first 30 people who show up. Now if you're not able to get into that, you can sign up to talk about the specific agenda item, but that means, so when there's public comment, it's usually within the first hour or first hour and a half of the city council meeting. If you're not able to sign up for general comment and you have to wait for the agenda specific public comment, you could be there until, like we were one time, till 9 o'clock at night, right? So, and technically, just to let you know, let's say you're lucky and you get there at 4:30, you can sign up for general comment in the beginning, and you can sign up to speak about the specific agenda item, so you can actually speak twice.
Tell us where.
The
location.
Oh, sorry.
And any parking snafus. Tell us that.
Does everybody know where the city council meets? I don't know.
Seriously,
Cross
people don't
streets.
know where they meet.
Do people know where they meet?
It's One Civic Plaza, it's at 5th and Marquette. If you go down Lomas, turn left on 3rd and make a right on Marquette, you go underground, save your ticket and they'll stamp it. So you can park underground under the Civic Plaza.
Please do not pay for your
And
parking, because then they will pay for it. But
So
we're-
then you walk up to the next level and go to the middle and it'll take you right into the council chamber.
It's the
It has a
building that-
big old red light says city council.
It looks like an accordion on the side that faces the city council.
And if we, and so just out of respect, so then we have two quick poets who wanted to share some poems, because these are poets from our community, and this is part of thinking outside of the box, because neighborhood associations, which I'm a part of, are all of a certain age group, right? And we need to grow our neighborhood associations, so they're not just one particular age group, right? We're the youngest, and I'm actually the oldest in my circle, but I'm the youngest of the neighborhood association. So we're gonna have, is Manuel Gonzalez, our poet laureate, do a poem real quick, and then myself. Part of our building community, right?
It's time for us to heal. It's time for us to heal from the wounds that were inflicted on our ancestors, the wounds that have been festering for generations that prevent us from manifesting our own destiny. Those broken bones that our grandfathers have underneath the soil that we're not allowed to mend. A system that was set up to steal our land, steal our resources, steal our language, our culture, steal the dignity that comes from providing for our own family. As those red lines were drawn around our barrios, our pueblos, around our ambitions, keeping our potential contained, making us forget our traditional ways, our wisdom that comes from connecting to our history, connecting to the tierra, connecting to the ways and means to move, Olin Mexica, the sacred sweat that strips from the lips, singing prayer songs that we adapt and we will not assimilate. We can't unwind the wisdom that's written on our DNA, because those scrolls hold pain and blood, screams and darkness, but the light is rising over that horizon. And we maneuver through this system, keeping our traditions while educating the minds of our children, uplifting our hearts, because our spirits are strong and our destiny has yet to be written. Thank you.
Talented people that Albuquerque Bootcamp has produced, because we're so busy looking outside and we don't even look inside at all the beauty. So next up is Marcial Delgado from the San Jose community back in the day.
Questions, so many questions. The questions they build and they never flee. Answers are never found, they only hang on decomposing trees. Hidden in tongue, who am I and where do I come from? Where can I possibly belong? Am I a victim of apocalyptic terror that only happened a few generations ago? Is my lineage a path of martyrs? What is my culture? The rancheras and lowriders. Am I indigenous to the American side of the world? Am I a warrior without a tribe to defend? A conquistador without any armor? Do I belong to the land that carries my heart? Does my soul melt away with the dawn and the sand? Questions, so many questions. Were my ancestors raped? Do their screams awaken within my dreams? Do I still wear the pain of their tears upon my sleeve? Were they buried together in a mass grave? Were the bones of my elders used as stone to bear the weight of the white man's pride? Was my grandfather's grandfather a slave? Did he work for the devil until he fell into his grave? Was he given a chance to run free? Did he grow with his children like the maize in his garden? Was he beaten and ripped apart? Was he taken away? Are there any gods or kings that I have yet to discover? Do they remain shrouded forever behind the shadow of Christ in the recesses of my mind? Did my ancestors migrate from the sacred Chaco Canyon, or did they build pyramids beneath the Mexican sun? Was I meant to be a shaman or a Catholic priest? Has my blood been spilled over 1 million times before I was born? Is my spirit a war drum torn and tattered on an ignored battleground? Questions, questions, so many questions. Why do they thrive on genocide? Why do they hate? Why do they take? Why is it so important to spread their diseases? Why must they bring forth so much demise to all that is alive and call it manifest destiny? What's so great about their dirty money anyway? Can anyone else see this one-sided society? Am I the only one going crazy? Should I stay quiet and pretend that genocide never happened? Or should I fight? Should I fight? Fight? Should I fight alongside with those who have had enough? Should I give to them some more of my blood? Or will they only ask for more? Thank you.
Those two poems, and a bunch of us, and some folks, Miss Martinez went and Loretta went, and we wrote poetry, and we talked about all these things that we talked about tonight, but then Manuel had us write poetry together, so those were two poems. They were inspired through our 2 nights coming together. So we want to be respectful of people. We're going to have one quick announcement, and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay, so Nick?
Very quickly, my name is Nick. I'm the president of the Santa Barbara Martinez Town Neighborhood Association. First of all, a big hand to these 3 people. We are currently a very active neighborhood, and we're running a little bit out of time, as it was mentioned this evening. There's another meeting tomorrow at the Santa Barbara Martinez Town School, 1420, on the north side, on Edith, and it has a little bit of a different take. A lot of you asked questions today, and those questions can, hopefully, maybe not, but at least we can continue to gather information. That information will be, your questions will be answered tomorrow by the city planners. Andrew Webb will be there, Russell Brito, Michaela Renz Whitmore will be there, and Councilor Benton as well will be there. It's primarily, one of the intents of that meeting is to bring all the District 2 neighborhood associations and residents that look like Santa Barbara Martinez Town under the same roof to network again, the same that you were doing tonight. So please come over, find yourself informed so you can vote appropriately next Monday at the meeting that we were talking about.
What time is that?
It starts at 6.
Repeat that address,
please. Time, whenever the last person leaves, is when the meeting will be finished.
And so just to be clear, to show we want to be open to all perspectives, right? So just to be clear, Andrew and I were in the same cohort. Andrew Webb and I in the same cohort in graduate school, right? So is Andrew more of an expert than I am just because he's a city planner? And I'm putting Andrew in the spot. And of course not. Of course not. So I just want to be clear, when we're thinking about these things, just because someone is a current city planner or someone is a current city councilor does not mean that they're the only ones with knowledge, right? That the point of this meeting was to, and like going back to what Nick was saying, is that we are all experts in knowledge. So then, did you have a quick logistical question, Patricia?
Yeah, just repeat that address again for tomorrow's meeting.
1420 Edith.
1420,
It's on the
okay.
east side, north of Mountain, before you get to Odelia.
Thank
And this
you.
is not about who's the biggest expert, it's rather getting some answers to your questions as to whether or not it is included in the comp plan, into the IDO, and how. Then you will actually know whether the answer is relevant or not. If you don't like the answer, vote no. If you like the answer, vote yes, however you want to do it.
And I don't think it's about whether you like the answer or not, it's about your interpretation and the process.
It's at the old Santa Barbara School, which is where my mom and her family went to school, way back in the day.
And I had my teacher from first grade and I'm 42, so that's pretty amazing. I just want to thank Ms. Martinez because I read one day in the paper that she retired after many years of commitment to teaching people from Mountain Village.
No, I need that.
Thank you. I went to an AIA lecture school in Warrenburg, architectural board in Habitat for